Welcome, my name is Lynn O'Donnell. I am the Public Information Coordinator for the Louisville Police Department. Thank you very much for coming to join us for our first quarterly meeting. We're planning to do these, as I said, as quarterly meetings, so our next one will hopefully be in June. We hope you will join us for that as we provide updates on the annexation process. Tonight you'll be seeing a presentation that the City Council saw during their recent retreat. That also includes a presentation from Police Chief Kevin Beaver. So feel free to ask any questions you have. I'll be keeping an eye out for any hands that go up so that we can be sure to get you the information you need before you leave tonight. So now I'm going to hand things over to our City Manager, Donna Barron.
Thank you for coming tonight. We're going to keep this really casual. So please interrupt, ask us questions. As Lynn just told you, we're going to be out here quarterly. We're going to try to do it the last month of each quarter, the last week of that month, so you kind of know when we're going to be out here on a consistent basis to answer your questions. This is a huge issue for us, and as I know, it's a huge issue for you guys. And so we want to work carefully with you and make sure you understand everything that's going on. So what I thought we would do, this is your implementation team. We're missing one of our folks right now, but this is the implementation team that will be working on this annexation project. So I thought we'd spend a little time introducing ourselves. So I am the city manager. I've worked for the city of Louisville as of this last February for 29 years. I've been here a long time. So I've seen the Castle Hills development since we signed that agreement in 1996. I have been working on this project since 1996. So I was out here when there was nothing. It was a big block. We got a truck stop. I was stuck out there in the mud. I always remember that when they took it out when we were driving the project. So I'm very familiar with it. I've been here quite a while and been very involved. And so I'll let Brenda introduce herself next, because she's going to be kind of the key coordinator on this project.
Yes. Yeah, my name is Brenda Martin. I'm currently the Director of Finance for the City of Louisville. I've been there for over 13 years at Louisville, or previously another city. But I do retire here in a few weeks from that position, but I will be working part-time, and my only focus is on implementing the annexation, the next steps. Just keeping it rolling. There's a lot to do within the next couple of years, so the city's ready to take on the residents and the citizens, as well as all the infrastructure maintenance and everything we've got to go on. And we're going to show you little pieces of that tonight. But anyway, that's what I'll be working on the next 2 years to make this as smooth of a process as possible for you all.
Ron, how do you go from the end to the
I'm Brian Larson, Public Works Manager. Take care of the drainage and streets and traffic control.
I'm Claire Powell. I'm one of the Assistant City Managers. I'm over Development Services, so zoning, economic development, that type of thing. I'm actually a reformed lawyer, so don't hold that against me. But my background, I used to work for the City of Dallas, and I moved to work for a firm that represented Frisco. We did a lot of the economic development agreements and zoning and land use out there, and then got lucky to join the Louisville team and have been here since.
And my name is Keith Marvin. I'm the Director of Public Services. I work with Ron over the streets and drainage as well as the utilities. So we provide water and sewer. Whether you know it or not, if you live north of that 544 now, you're drinking Louisville water. If you're living south of 544, your water comes from the Upper Trinity Regional Water District. But upon the annexation, we will manage that system. We treat all the wastewater that comes out of Castle Hills. I'm also involved in the fleet facility operation for the city of Louisville. So any buildings or grounds that we maintain, other than the parks and the meetings and that sort of thing, parks and maintenance, we take care of those. We've got a big team. We're beginning the process, and we'll get into that here in a few minutes, but we're beginning the process of assessing all of that infrastructure when we come to the city.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Beaver. I'm the police chief. I was appointed in August of this past year, 2018. I've got over 20 years with the city of Louisville, 9 before that with the city of San Angelo.
I'm Richard Lukey, and I'm planning director with Claire, and I'm responsible for zoning, pretty much all development issues and our long-range plan.
I'm Melinda Dollar, and I've worked for the city for 32 years, and I'm one of the other assistant city manager. And I am responsible for public safety, emergency management, the library, ITS, and human resources.
And she's actually running our presentation, but we have another director. Gina, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Gina Thompson. I'm the Director of Strategic Services. I oversee the budget and performance management for the city. So anything you want to know about how the city performs is out of our metrics.cityoflouisville.com. I always try to plug that so that you can go out and take a look at it.
So the presentation we have for you tonight, can everybody hear? I didn't want to have to pass around the microphone. Okay. So the presentation we have tonight is something we presented to City Council at our February retreat. So every February, we have a planning session with the City Council. We actually moved that first day of our retreat to Castle Hills this year, so we could talk to the City Council and give them an update as to where we are on annexation planning and to get final direction. So we've got a few updates from what we talked with Council about in February, but by and large, if you were here in February, because I know a few of you did attend, you may see some information that you've seen before. So this first slide just basically tells you some of the things we talked with Council about. That the point we're at now is we're analyzing city costs and staffing increases anticipated due to annexation. We're very much in the early stages of that. There's some additional studies, and we'll talk about that in more detail, like water studies and things that we'll be working on in 2019 and 2020. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as we move forward. And then finally, we're doing a complete infrastructure assessment. That's basically Keith that's working on that, and he'll talk to you some more about that in detail and why that's so important to us. One thing certainly our city council was very interested in is the change in the statistics since our last retreat. Certainly for us, our ability to annex has a lot to do with the taxable assessed value. And so we look at that on a regular basis. So you can see that growth in assessed value between 18 and 19, which is what allows us to annex those districts without impacting the Louisville tax rate. That has always been a huge issue with Louisville. That's actually in the 96 agreement. And we would not annex any of the districts until there was a point where it was not having an impact on the Louisville tax rate. In other words, the Louisville residents would not be paying to bring to Castle Hills. And we believe at this point we can do that. Your average market value of your homes increased. Again, we're always looking at your tax rates, and just for comparison purposes, your lowest tax rate now is 51 cents and ours is 43. There's your number of family units. Your outstanding debt has grown some. And then you see certainly that breakout with 1G and 1H, which are your two newer districts. There's also a map. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the Castle Hills map. But we tend to think of Castle Hills, and I see heads shaking, you know? So when we think about Castle Hills, we think about it in relation to the districts. So as you know, maybe you don't know, so I'll stop and explain this. So Castle Hills is kind of a complicated financial model in that when we first annexed a 5-foot strip all around the boundaries of Castle Hills, we brought you into our extraterritorial jurisdiction. No other city can annex Castle Hills but Louisville. And then at that point, when we started that process in 96, you had District 1A, which is the managing district, and you gotta do my band. Little bitty green. A little bitty green. At one time was very large. And so when A began B and C and D, so A started shrinking as those other districts developed. And so the water districts were actually created as the development was phased. So you had 1A, the managing district, which is what the agreements are basically with, 1A. 1B was the first residential district. 1C is primarily the golf course.
The light green.
The light green. And then you have the additional supplement D, E, F, G, and H. H is that dark green, that is what we call the realm. That is property that you see a high-rise coming out of the ground now. So that is a mixed-use development. It will be a very high-end mixed-use development. And some multifamily in the more southern part of that. So the Louisville's role in Castle Hill was the water districts were formed by the Brights, right? And then Louisville came in and we layered a public improvement district on top of each one of the water districts. And it is those public improvement districts that issue debt. So it is City of Louisville debt, which you guys are responsible for paying. And that's what your tax rate pays. Does that make sense? I know that's a complicated thing and it's always confusing to folks, but that's kind of in a nutshell how it has worked over these past 20 plus years. So anyway, if there's any more questions, we'll just keep working through.
Do you have a question?
Is there going to be any more districts?
No, sir. All the
Okay.
districts are done. G and H is the last district.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the missing pieces, again, you remember the goal of Louisville is to annex so that it does not impact the tax rate of the Louisville residents. And so what we wanted to do is to be able to bring all the districts in at the same time. The problem with that is, so debt was issued over time. With 1B, as early as 96, you had debt issued, so that debt's been being paid down all these years. When you have 1G and 1H, they're just now being developed, and that debt is just now being issued. And so it's difficult for Louisville to annex that in without affecting our tax rate. And so what we did is we worked with the districts and we developed TERS number 3. So TERS number 3, Tax Increment Financing District, another financing tool, was actually layered on top of, point to G and H, remember? There's H again, and the orange is G. Those are your districts that are just now developing. And so that tax increment financing district is layered on top of G and H. And so the way that will work is there's already been some debt issued for both G and H. And so the way a tax increment financing district works is there's a base value that's established the year of creation, and all development that occurs after that base year, actually that differential tax collection only goes to the tip. It doesn't go to the city. And so then those revenues will be paid to pay down that debt, and then no more debt will be issued. All the rest of it, as Chris Bryant continues to develop, he will be reimbursed in cash via the tip. That's complicated, so I'm going to stop here. I think, Brenda, you talk about that a little bit later. The other benefit to the TIF is not only does the city participate in the TIF, but the county participates also. So we say 100% of our increment that we would have received in property taxes will go into the TIF to pay for the debt and to pay for the cash reimbursement to Chris Bride. From the county perspective, it's 80% of that increment. That makes sense?
And the cash reimbursement, just to keep in mind, is for the public infrastructure, the roads, the water and sewer lines that are still left to put in. So as the developer puts those in, we don't pay him back immediately. We only pay him back when there's revenues in that TIF to pay him back. So it's a way for him to get paid for the rest of the public improvements, and then us go ahead and annex the whole area in.
So only those people that live in G&H, pay taxes in G&H, are paying for that. I heard there was a rumor going around that all of you guys were paying for that, and you're not. It's only G&H that pays for the property taxes collected in G&H go towards that TIF, to retire that debt and to reimburse Bright for infrastructure.
Yeah, right now, G&H's tax rate is $1, so it'll go down to the 43 cents, Louisville's rate, and that 43 cents that they're already paying will go toward this. So that's not an additional tax, even if you live in G&H.
So that was a huge step to get that TIP put in place. It was very, very important that the county participated. County doesn't always participate in TIPs, but they're also very interested in you guys being a city. We know it's not a good situation that you're not in a city proper. And so the county was very supportive of participating in this TIP. So that was a milestone. That was really what allowed us to say confidently that we can annex, we can move forward with annexation. So just to refresh your memory on some of the ways services are provided to you, we already provide some services. We supply water north of 544. That's all direct to city water. We already do your sewer. Keith will talk a little bit about that. Fire, you have full fire services. We just opened a new fire station that will support Castle Hills and Louisville that's out here already. And certainly you have police services. You don't have full police services, and I'm going to let Chief Deaver talk about that a little bit later. Denton County supplies some of the services that we would normally supply. Animal control, development permit, fire marshal, and certainly library services. All of the libraries in Denton County actually participate in the statewide program so that you can use different libraries at no cost. So I'm guessing most of you that are library users actually use the Carrollton branch. You can do that at no cost. Certainly we'd like you to come use our library. We're going to talk a little bit about the services that we offer at the Louisville Library. And then certainly the state of Texas is your restaurant inspection now. Once you're annexed, we'll actually take over that, and you'll have more frequent restaurant inspections, and you can go out to Gina's dashboard, and you can actually see the rating for all the restaurants and other foods. The services the city does not provide and can't provide at this point would be code enforcement. And the last time we were out here, we got some questions related to code enforcement. Because you don't fall under city ordinances, we cannot enforce any type of code issues. Building inspection, economic development, those type of incentive packages and programs can only be within our city limits proper. Parks and recreation, right now, you can actually use any of the parks facilities in Louisville, and we treat you just like a citizen. And we've done that for a number of years. But we don't maintain your parks. Most of that's done by the HOA. I think the district has a few. But that will change dramatically at annexation. And certainly, we're very concerned about long-term infrastructure maintenance programs. We have a very developed program in Louisville about how we maintain and fund our infrastructure maintenance. So we're trying to pull Castle Hills would fall into that program. So Denton County, this was we were educating the council on what makes up the current services provided by your freshwater supply district, that's District 1A. 27 full-time employees. There's a list of what they currently perform and kind of how they operate. Just for comparison purposes, we have 850 employees, so we're a little bit larger. So the direction we got from council from retreat was to proceed with annexation, to really start spending a great deal more time analyzing the cost of services, what are we going to need to do to support Castle Hills. So Keith's going to be looking at how many crews do we have to add to maintain your streets, to maintain the water and sewer lines. And just so you know, because the funding mechanism for the infrastructure, the city of Louisville actually already owns your infrastructure. We actually already own your streets, we own your water lines, and we own your sewer lines. But we don't maintain them right now, because that's the job of the freshwater supply district. And annexation will take over all of that. So we have to figure out what kind of staff resources it's going to take. Animal control, that's something we don't do for you at all. And so, will our animal facility be large enough? Do we have an adequate number of staff members that can respond to the needs of Castle Hills? So we'll be looking at that on a department by department basis. Okay, at this point, I'm going to let Melinda and the chief talk about public safety and where we are on that now.
Do you want us to wait till the end to ask questions, or do you want us to ask questions?
It's casual, you can ask questions.
Okay, so when, you were saying you have a significantly larger staff, which is true compared to what we have. When you annex in all of the residents of Castle Hills, will you look at adding more staff to the city of Louisville? For example, like inspections and some of those things, I know for the city of Louisville, I mean, it's increased over the years, the time that it takes with your department, so I'm just wondering, once we're all annexed, is that going to even be a longer time to try to get inspections done of the city, or are you going to look at adding more staff?
We're going to look at it instead. Absolutely. So if you think about it, so when we annex, so we bring in all that additional tax base.
Right.
So that's on the debt service, but that's also on the O&M side. And so absolutely, we want the same efficiencies and effectiveness out here in Castle Hills that we have in the city proper. So absolutely, we will. We know we're going to add staff. I'm going to tell you, we're going to add a number of people to public services. We're going to have to add to the police. Fire's already now fully staffed because of the new station. But yes, animal control, I'm sure we're going to have to add here. So yes, that'll be a department by department analysis, but I'm quite sure we're going to get it.
Okay, because I know specifically for inspections here in Castle Hills, it's a pretty quick turnaround, but for the city of Louisville, when we're requesting an inspection, it's just kind of grown over the years, taking longer, so that's what, I just wanted to make sure that was something that was looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to be efficient and effective.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
When will you provide the court enforcement?
I'm sorry if you're
When will you provide court enforcement?
Code
Code
enforcement?
enforcement?
When you provide it,
Yeah, that's,
after annexation.
After annexation, yes, at annexation. And we can't do any code enforcement until we annex it, because then our ordinances are effective within Castle Hills. Claire, did you want to?
The only thing I was going to add is, so code enforcement, and there's some confusions, especially in cities. I know we had that in Frisco when there was a lot of HOAs. So code enforcement is authorized to enforce codes that are City of Louisville codes. So you may have another layer on top of that are HOA codes. Your HOA still has their authority to do enforcement on HOA stuff. It's just city codes would be, high grass and weeds, those types of things that we have, junk vehicles, those things that are across the board would be applied at annexation.
it's noise.
Yes, yes. Any other questions? Okay, let's talk cops.
Okay, so I don't know if all of you are aware, but you contract for public safety. We've already talked a little bit about the fire that you're getting full service, but on the contract for police historically has only covered basic services. So what that means, we respond to calls for service. That's what the contract covers. Now, the general manager could request expanded services, so if he wanted additional traffic enforcement or if he wanted additional services, he could do that at an additional cost. This year, the cost for police services for basic services is $567,663. Now, it's important that you realize that the police and fire contract actually is paid for from your sales tax dollars that are collected in the SPA. And I think Brenda will talk a little bit more about the SPA. But all the tax that you collect, and if you remember, you all adopted the fire control tax, you voted that in. So that's a new sales tax revenue that's coming in on top of the sales tax that is used to pay for the public safety services.
Can we start? Does everybody know what we mean when we say the SPA?
Yes.
Now, it's called, it's a strategic partnership agreement. And what that means is a limited annexation for sales tax purposes. We did it a number of years ago, and that's approved by each one of your districts and the Louisville City Council. And what that allows us to do is to collect sales tax within the districts.
So, and, yes,
I'm sorry, so, and that's, you're being careful to distinguish that from property tax, right?
Yes, sales tax.
Yeah, can you, make that distinction a little bit for us? So the property tax, does that go through the same funnels?
No, the property tax is collected by the water districts. It stays with the water districts.
Okay, you said that.
The only way that, so the water districts pay for the debt service. And there's a trustee relationship. Those payments are made to the trustee who then makes those bond payments. That's the only way your property tax is now being paid that would do anything related to Louisville. It's the debt service. Sales tax, that's the 1% sales tax that goes to the city. What is not collected in Castle Hills right now is the half penny that we had passed related to DCTA. Also, the 4B sales tax is collected in the districts because we have that. That's a 1/4 cent sales tax for park purposes. And then you approved last summer the fire control sales tax, which is 1/8 cent. And that is dedicated to fire services. Right now, we're in the legislative session, legislative process. We're trying to get a bill passed that would allow us to hold another election in the districts for crime control sales tax. Does that answer your question?
Much of it. Still complicated, but I think
It's a little
that's
bit, please ask away, it's complicated.
Thank you.
so what I wanted to make sure everybody understood, a couple of years ago, the general manager wanted some additional expanded police services, and at the time we had 20 police officer vacancies. We weren't able to meet those needs. And so they contracted with a third party who provided off-duty police officers who patrol. An off-duty police officer has more limitations. They can only deal with breaches of peace or felonies. So what often resulted, that person would then call Louisville and we would respond. So this year, we had some conversations and the general manager asked if at this point would we be able to provide those expanded services through our police department. And we were able to do that. And we went to the city council on January 28th and asked, in addition to those expanded services, could we also start using all of our other Louisville police resources in Castle Hills? Because prior to January of this year, we've not been able to do that. Officers did not patrol. We needed a neighborhood resource officer, or if we needed a gang unit or narcotics, none of that could come into the district without a direct request from the general manager. So all of that changed, and Chief Deaver will talk to you a little more about that. I just wanted everybody to know that we now are patrolling under expanded services about 16 hours a day. We've been doing that since February 1st, and as we go through the presentation, you'll see some of the effects of that. One of the things I did want to point out, last year you averaged about 302 calls for service per month. I just looked at February, and in Castle Hills there were 750 calls for service. So there was a lot of concern that those calls for service were going to increase your contract, but they're not, because I don't know if any of y'all had that concern, but you're paying every year that contract's based on the number of calls for service you had the previous year. So when we scrubbed that data and pulled out all those calls for service that were either generated by that overtime officer or calls for service that overtime officer responded to during that 16 hours, it reduced down to 222 calls. So ultimately, if it were based on the same cost per call, that would have resulted in about a $13,000 savings to the contract for next year. So you're getting much more police service in the districts, but I wanted to alleviate anybody's concern that you're going to be double billed for those. So then also we wanted to talk about, we've seen there's been a lot of negative publicity or comments on social media, and we wanted to address those today and make sure that any misunderstandings or any misinformations out there, that we have the opportunity to correct that. Some of the things that we saw on social media, that when you no longer had the off-duty officers, that you were losing control about what the officers did. Well, our police officers obviously work under the direction of Chief Deaver, but all of our police officers have officer discretion to do what they need to do. They do that, that's in Louisville, and that's the same out in Castle Hills. There was some conversation about speed traps. One thing that is a timing issue, the general manager had requested, he had had complaints from some citizens about some cut-through traffic over close to Trinity Medical, and he asked for some additional traffic enforcement in January. And so we were out doing that enforcement. And I think there was some overlap, and citizens thought that we were, instead of patrolling, we were just setting and running radar. And that wasn't part of that. That was the additional traffic enforcement requested by the general manager by some of the districts. So once we started,
Excuse me, who's the general manager? I'm not sure.
Bill Brissot, y'all know him?
So District 1A is the managing district, and he's the district manager.
And per the public safety contract, he's the one that takes the request and calls either me or Chief Deaver and asks for those services. So we've been providing expanded services since February 1st. So Chief Deaver has a lot more information to share about that. One of some of the other issues that we saw on social media, what the cost of the Louisville officers under the contract. Now, just so you understand, we have a third party that does a cost analysis that sets those rates. And what goes into that rate that's charged is more than just that police officer's salary, because it includes the dispatch, the cost of dispatch, the cost of supervision. There might be jail operations that result from some activity in the Castle Hills. So we run our jail records, all of that rolls into that cost of that per hour cost. So any other information or questions at the end when we're through with the presentation, we'll be glad to talk about those and make sure that we hopefully can answer any concerns or questions you have.
Other questions?
So one thing we wanted to kind of talk about, based on the council's decision, some of the resources that the police department has that they're now able to utilize in Castle Hills at no additional cost through the contract. We have neighborhood resource officers. They're available to come to your house and give you a safety, tell you things that you can do to increase the safety of your home. They can come to your neighborhood meetings and do crime watch meetings, help you set up crime watch groups in your neighborhood. They'll be out on National Night Out in your neighborhoods. They also are very good at problem solving. Sometimes you'll find where some neighbors get crossways over, and it results in a lot of calls for service. Maybe it's a noise disturbance or a parking issue or whatever. Rather than just officers going out and stopping the issue at that time, we can send neighborhood resource officers out to work with those neighbors and try to solve that problem so that we no longer have those calls. So we also have traffic. We will be working traffic out here. The traffic officers, they look for accidents where we've had accidents, and that's where they target traffic. So now you may see some of our traffic units out in Castle Hills. Street crimes, gang officers, narcotics, all of those special units now. As Chief Deaver sees needs, as needs arise, he will be using all of those resources at no additional cost.
We felt it was important, the city council felt it was important, that all of our team, our police team, is starting to learn about Castle Hills. That's why we think it's so important that we already, 2 years before annexation, that we're already out here and we're getting to meet you. Our neighborhood services officers really want to become part of the community. And so council really wanted to go in and take that step prior to annexation.
Our hope is that you develop that positive relationship that our citizens of Louisville have with our police officers. So basically, Chief Deaver will talk a little bit more about how he sees the use of this. The next slide that I want to talk about is the response times. So we've always, because we're only responding to calls for service, we're not out here patrolling. So when an officer gets a call for service, he is responding from Louisville proper. And so you can see that over the years, from 2013 to 2018, the response time has always been higher in Castle Hills. But when I pulled the 2019, that has January, where we didn't have special patrol, but then we added the special patrol in February, and this is through today. And you can see that having that special officer dedicated out here has actually made that reverse to where priority 2 and 3 calls are actually being responded to quicker now in Castle Hills than they are in Louisville proper. So as we continue to add more months to that, I expect that you will continue to see that, which is obviously a huge benefit compared to the last few years. So as we go on for our next steps, Chief Deaver and I both want to volunteer ourselves and our officers. If you have neighborhood meetings, you have any time that you would like for either of us or any of our officers to come out and talk to you, we are more than happy to do that. We are meeting monthly with a group of people on the Public Safety Committee. We're looking at all those calls for service so that you know what's going on with that overtime. He's going to give you some more details on what we're actually doing out here. We want to be as transparent as possible to let you know what's going on. So I think we're going to wait till the end, or we're going to do it now.
I think we'll do it now.
Okay, let's go ahead and let Chief Deaver talk about some of the stats.
Yeah, so I wanted to go through some things and answer your question about the staffing that the city manager talked about. We have already started that with the police department. Starting next week, we've got a firm coming in, and they're going to look at everything that we do. They're going to evaluate if we need additional personnel, whether or not we can streamline some of our services, but it's all in preparation for annexation. So, and like the manager said, that's going to be a department by department process, but that process has already been done. So I figured there would be a lot of questions about the Castle Hills Patrol, so that's what I've got some points on here. So right now, as of today, we have worked 1,411 hours out here strictly based on the Castle Hills. We've only not managed the shifts for 14 hours that we were supposed to fill, if that makes sense. So 14 hours, we couldn't find an officer to cover that shift, so those shifts went vacant. We made 756 traffic stops, but only 28% of those resulted in any sort of citation. And I know I've heard a lot about, we're out here writing a lot of tickets, and that's simply not the case. There's been open records requests and things like that that back that up, that we're not just out here simply doing that. But what you all have to realize also is you have not had any police service for ever since this place has been in existence. So everyone has kind of developed bad habits. You come up to that four-way stop that you come up to every day at 3 o'clock, and there's never anyone there, and you kind of go through it. Well, now our guys are out there, and they're going to stop you for that. And like Ms. Scholar said, they have that discretion whether or not to write a ticket. Most of the time they're not. And kind of the same thing with parking violations. We check out on a lot of those violations, and that's in the calls for service. But in most of those instances, they're going up and talking to the resident and explaining to them why it's a parking violation. So we're trying to educate everyone throughout this process And Melinda kind of hit on the response time dropping. You know, it's dropped over 3 minutes in the time it would take us to get here. And we kind of hit on the double dipping the charge. So I want to go back to that just real quick. So when you had the other firm, you were paying them to patrol the area. If they came up on anything that was not a breach of the peace or a felony, and really even if it was, they still called us. So you were paying us for a cost for service that we had to respond to, and you were paying that company. What we're doing now is we're going through those calls, and if the Castle Hills patrol officer that is dedicated to this area, if he takes care of that call, then you're not going to be charged for that call. And so I kind of hit on that a little bit, but I want to make sure that you all are understanding of that and realize that there's not going to be any double dipping with it. We have had some of those other units already out here. If you remember, I guess it's probably been about 2 months ago now. It might have been right before we started, but we had some robberies right out here on 121. Well, what we did was we sent our street crime unit out here, and they did surveillance and set up on potential locations, and they were able to apprehend the person and persons responsible for those robberies. That's a service that you all would have had to pay for prior, that you're not having to pay for now. Just an example of that. So with that, I think I'll see if you have any questions for me.
Is there a specific number of police officers that are dedicated only to Castle Hills?
Okay, so when we released some information before, there was some kickback on social media about us telling you exactly what we're doing and educating criminals. Y'all feel comfortable with us when we say?
You don't have to say the hours, but it's 16 hours a day.
We have one additional police officer right now scheduled for 16 hours a day, and that's all he does.
And it rotates, it's not the same one, so we post it for overtime and a 4-hour shift increments. So you might have 4 different officers working a 16-hour shift that day. Or you
It's
might
not
have
rotated between all of the different Castle Hills neighborhoods. If they're so spread out, it doesn't feel necessarily like one neighborhood all the time.
Yeah, the direction that I've given them is I want them to patrol all of the districts out here. I don't want them setting up, doing stationary radar, or setting up on stop signs, for hours on the end. At 5 o'clock, they may set up on a 4-way stop sign that traditionally that people are running or an area where there's speed at certain times. But the goal is to have them mobile, and I think it's indicative with, we've got almost 8,400 miles that officer has driven since we started this. So they're out patrolling the areas, they're keeping the car moving.
Just like they do in this.
Just like they do.
I have a question, but I was going to say, we are not walking a lot, we do see them all over the place, and they're not just in an area. But is there going to be like a substation? I don't know how Louisville set up, does it like Dallas, does it have like police substations? Or is it
No,
just
Louisville
one
does not have any
substation?
substations.
So everything will be out.
Yeah, and the problem with substations is that there's that expectation that they're going to be manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what a lot of cities our size and roughly equivalent to us that did develop substations when it was a thing back in the 90s, they all closed them down because it's just impossible to meet the expectations and have them staffed and have the people there needed.
And that's not really how the police department operates.
Yeah.
They're assigned to beats. and
Once
so-
they leave there.
That's right. So the substation really doesn't.
On the 16-hour service, is that 16 hours randomly throughout a 24-hour period as opposed to just 8?
Yeah, that's what we got beat up for, was telling people exactly when we were going to work. So what I will say, what I did was I pulled the numbers hour by hour for a 24-hour time period, and we picked the busiest times of the day. And that's when we had officers down here.
Yeah,
We're going to try to get out of the sun here.
let me add to that too. I think one of the things that is missing here, that's really important is that we also now, when I look at our officers, we also are patrolling with officers that are on duty, working Louisville, are also driving through. So you should, and when I look at all the calls for service and you look at the patrol, all hours you have officers, and that's the difference. Before, they only came into Castle Hills if they were responding to a call for service. After January 28th, council approved Chief Deaver telling his officers, you can patrol Castle Hills. If you want to drive through Castle Hills, that's fine. So it's a misnomer to think only those 16 hours that are filled is the only time you have patrol. Because I've seen it myself when I'm watching our ability ABL, I see officers all the time coming in and out of Castle Hills. So when you're seeing officers, you may not be seeing the officer on overtime. You might be seeing an officer that's actually working the patrol shift that day. Or you might be seeing a neighborhood resource officer driving through, or even a
Could be a
traffic.
traffic officer.
So if you-
It's open now.
Yeah, if you see a traffic officer set up on a road running radar, you can be assured it's not your overtime patrol officer. That might be a traffic officer that decided, maybe one of the officers told him that there's a safety issue because of speeding, and that's why our traffic officers, they go to work with safety issues. That's the reason they do traffic enforcement.
And I saw some notes when Ms. Goddard mentioned the calls for service and the increase to 750 in February. What that is that it's that officer initiating his own activity. So that's the parking violations, the checking out of suspicious circumstances, and things like that. And just for an example, during February, there were 67 times that officer checked out on a parking violation. There were a lot of burglar alarms, which that's the highest call that you guys have out here. There were 33 residential burglar alarms, 12 business burglar alarms, 5 panic alarms. Most of the crimes that were actually reported out here, the highest number is forgery, and those are crimes that you report at your house, but they occur somewhere else. So that's not a Castle Hills crime per se. There was only 1 burglary of a building, 3 burglary of a habitation, and 1 burglary of a vehicle, and a couple of criminal mischiefs. So that's the reason for the increase, and it's also the traffic stops.
I will tell you, one thing that you can do that will benefit our police department is take care of your alarm. Talk about false alarms.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing right now, and we understand that that's mandated through your HOAs that you all have alarms. I don't know if that will go away once we're annexed, or you're annexed, but that's a huge deal. If you can cancel that alarm, that benefits you all. That's a charge that you will not be charged for. But if there are problems with your alarms, if every Saturday your house cleaner trips the alarm, then do something to address that so that we're not responding out here.
Because we're going to treat it as a priority call.
Yeah,
We're going to treat it like you got a burglary in progress, every single one of them.
And there's been some discussion with the dedicated patrol officer that's out here, is not having him respond to those alarm calls. Well, that's a priority 1 call in the city of Louisville, and we're going to treat it that same way here. And to me, it makes no sense not to send the closest unit to those types of calls. 99% of them are false, but it could be that 1% where, especially the panic alarms, it may be a real call, and we would be negligent if we didn't send the closest officer to it.
So please help us.
The alarms for false alarm?
Yes.
That is to tens of thousands of dollars a year. So that's not just 50 city bus units, it's tens of thousands of dollars right out of our pockets. It is, we actually looked at charging residents $50 after you free, I think those boys for solar, plan on 3 a year, and after that, you wind up having to pay for it. Thousands and thousands.
Wouldn't it once we're in it, wouldn't we even be, the individual homeowner would be the one that's charged?
Well, and you're being charged now, so that's still, we are contracting, as part of the public safety contract, we're handling your alarm permit. So you register for your alarm, and then state law dictates how many false alarms you can have and what that fee is, and we're handling that right now. But if you think about every home having 3 false alarms, and I guess some people are paying those false alarms, I don't know, but yeah. But I can tell you that so far for all of February and all of March, of all the alarm calls, because I've been working on the report today, not one alarm has been a true alarm.
But it takes a ton of stuff.
And there's no repeated vendors or anything?
Oh, we
Yeah.
got.
Not me,
Would you want the names?
I think it's a $50 fine.
but we still pay for the police defense too, right?
Yeah, so it's two-part. You're paying, the homeowner's paying to register and paying for those false alarms. But under our contract, remember, as I mentioned, your public safety contract for police services based on the number of calls of service you had the previous year. So all of those calls for service that are false alarm calls are $162.21 per call. That's how we determine what that public safety contract is. That's how we get that $567,000. That is the cost of that contract. And as Chief Deaver mentioned, the majority of those calls are false alarms. So if you could get those down, then that public safety contract would be less.
I think there was a question.
So we still using the contracted security people?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, they had some scheduled, I believe, into February. We started February 1. They had people scheduled, I believe, through like the 15th. They continued, and then once they were off the schedule, they didn't
Can I
continue.
clarify that? So, yeah, the Capitol Hills Patrol people, that's been out, not going to drive through the truck. That's now been retired. You're still going to see the white truck. That's an HOA security, that's a part of security HOA, part of contracts. They're still patrolling. Does that make sense? Yes. The white van truck.
Yeah. I want to make certain, I thought I understood before, we were talking about the staffing, the patrols. It seemed like to me it was a really positive thing, so I want to make sure I understood. If we have a patrolman that's coming through the area and there's a situation going on, they can answer that call. There's also assigned areas, right? So they get to know our community, and that'll get a lot different from what we've had in the past, where it's just kind of a rent. I won't say rent a cop.
Yes, sir.
And that's what was great that the council allowed us to do. They allowed us to come out here and get our foot in the door, I guess, so to speak.
Okay.
And get to know everyone and learn the ins and outs of this area. Because it is a little bit different than Louisville, and we want to, figure those things out as we go.
That's a huge thing.
One last thing was, there's been some discussion about golf carts, and can we regulate them, can we not regulate them? We're still in that process of evaluating that, because this is and Ms. Dollar could probably explain it better than I can, because of the master housing community aspect of it. There's an AG ruling that is out there. We're still discussing with our city attorney whether or not that AG ruling is still applicable, or if there's a new ruling or anything else that would come into play. But the one thing that I would say about that is, to me, there's no logical reason a 10-year-old needs to be driving a golf cart. But to me, it's a parental issue more so than anything, and maybe with a combined effort, we can do that education and help people, because it's going to be a matter of time before someone's hurt.
Basically, if it's a master plan community, so your attorney, the district attorneys are looking at that, but if the AG's opinion that is it's the most current, says if it's a master plan community, then they can write rules in their covenant. But other than that, there can be no rules. So if those rules weren't established at the time the master plan community was established, and they could then at that point limit it and say, you have to have a driver's license to drive it, you can drive at night or not at night, they can put those rules in place. If not, if it is not a master plan community, then the city can pass ordinances to govern that. But it is our feeling at this time, we're verifying it, that this is a master plan community. So if those rules were not established in the covenant, then it could be that it would take an election to change those rules. So that's really going to end up being a question for the attorneys here in the district.
And our attorney organization.
Yeah.
Other questions about law enforcement? I will tell you that the city of Louisville, we spend $30 million annually on our police department. So we collect about $500,000 related to services for Castle Hills. So just keep that in mind. We're certainly not out here writing tickets to try to make up that debt. We spend $30 million a year on law enforcement. The study that we have decided to go forward with, City Council authorized, is a staffing study that I'm sure is going to tell us that we need to add officers as we bring on Castle Hills, which will be some additional cost. And it's not easy to add officers. Chief, talk a little bit about how long it takes to get a personnel on the street.
Yeah, so right now we have 9 openings. 7 of those are because we got more officers in this year's fiscal budget. But it takes about a year to get an officer fully trained, sent through an academy, through that field training program, before they're ever any benefit, before we can mark them off as, being a full contributor to what we're doing. And then one other thing on the citations, the vast majority of that fine goes to the state. The city does not see very much of it at all.
And I think about 80% of the tickets we're writing are warnings.
Yes.
So no money's collected. So just make sure you share that story. Louisville's not out here trying to offset our police costs. We're all about trying to get the same rules in place that we have in the city.
And to add to Kevin's, the length of time it takes to get an officer, we hire less than 1% of the people that apply to be a Louisville police officer due to the standards that we have. And so we're out recruiting. Anybody that you know out here, we're always looking for good officers, but it's very important to us. We put all of our officers through a very strict background process that includes multiple levels, including polygraphs and psychologicals. And so we're hiring right now about 1% of the people that apply. So it's not only takes a long time to get them hired, we go through lots of applicants before we find a good officer. But we don't want to be that city that has the officers that make the news for doing things that don't reflect positively on our community.
So we're down 9 officers right now. Dallas, 700?
Yeah, it was 800 last time.
Yeah, 800 officers. That's almost impossible to get those jobs filled. It's really tough. So yeah, send us good candidates. So next, let's talk a little bit about zoning.
Okay, the 1996 agreement really outlined how Castle Hills would develop as far as land uses. And this slide kind of outlines the basic categories that were outlined in the agreement. 250 acres of multifamily, 20 units per acre, 1,600 acres of all residential, that's combining both multifamily and single family, 30 acres designated for the village center, 80 acres for a town center, maximum 850 acres for light industrial type uses, and then no less than 450 acres for public and private open space, and that does include golf course. So these provisions are kind of the backbone as to how Castle Hills has developed thus far and how it will develop in the future. There have been a few amendments to the land uses over the years, but primarily This recipe for the development has been moving forward through all these years. The agreement also specified that the lands would develop under Louisville's 1996 zoning ordinance. That means the zoning categories that were in place at that time applied to Castle Hills moving forward. They still do today. And it also applied our land development regulations or our general development ordinance. That is one ordinance that the city has that does apply. All cities' subdivision regulations in the state of Texas applies to any ETJ areas. And that is why as different portions of Castle Hills gets platted, it has to be approved by our planning and zoning commission because the state delegates that power. That's something that's a statewide activity.
And ETJ is extraterritorial jurisdiction, which John was saying is, just want to make sure you know what ETJ acronyms.
Thank you, Claire.
And we use them all.
We use them all.
And one of the things that was done from the very beginning, since there was this commitment to using those land use categories, as land was platted, that zoning designation was placed on that plat. So my planning staff put together this map reflecting the areas that are already developed and reflecting the zoning designation that area developed under. Just looking at a variety of different uses. Now, one of the issues that we're going to be looking at is, since 1996, the zoning districts in the current city limits have been modified over time. And we're currently going over a major overhaul of our zoning and development ordinances. So our primary concern is what happens in annexation. Because state law mandates all cities, as they annex new territory, that new territory comes in under your most restricted zoning district. That is our agricultural open space district, which is usually either farms or single-family residences that are on large acreages. And that's not what Castle Hills is. Typically, when cities annex developed area, they have to analyze the area and determine what are the best and appropriate zoning categories. Luckily, a lot of that work has been done for us. But there's also a lot of special provisions in that 1996 agreement. That's been kind of the rule book for all things involving Castle Hills, particularly with development and infrastructure. So what we are planning on doing is start working on developing a planned development zoning district that will be customized for Castle Hills. And these will be the base districts. So we will be working with a consultant and with Bright Development on putting that together probably starting next year. And our goal is to kind of have that ready so that the moment that annexation occurs, you'll only be zoned agricultural open space for a very short period of time. Immediately after, we'll go ahead and rezone all of Castle Hills for that planned development, reflecting these base zoning districts and the way that each of the different neighborhoods develop. And at that point, everything that's on the ground will be legally conforming from a zoning perspective. So with that, I'll do a real quick little synopsis. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I think I had the easy part.
We're just not used to having the easy part. Okay, let's talk about infrastructure assessments.
Yeah, so basically we're looking at what infrastructure is going to come to the city for maintenance. Don mentioned earlier that we already own some of these assets, we're just not responsible for maintaining them today. So the things that we're looking at, the streets and alleys, the street signs, the pavement markings, curb ramps, street lights, screening and retaining walls, and then the underground infrastructure, the drainage system, the wastewater collection system, and the water distribution system. Interesting, I mentioned earlier, the water distribution system, you've got a Castle Hills branded water tower, you've got a couple of ground storage tanks over there, you've got a pump station. All of those things work with that Upper Trinity Regional Water District water feed. The rest of the Castle Hills area actually floats off of our pressure plane from our Austin Ranch Tower and then some of our other facilities on the periphery of Castle Hills.
And that doesn't change after annexation?
We're going to study that. We have, and it's going to get a little bit complicated, we have a 735 pressure zone outside of Castle Hills. So East Louisville, the Castle Hills pressure zone is the same. So we could look at combining those two systems and operate them with the rest of the Louisville system. We haven't made a decision yet whether or not we would do that. So it can be, it was set up to be able to operate that way. It has not been. In fact, I said it has not been. There have been times in the past where there was a failure of the Castle Hills distribution system. We do have valves that we can open up today and backfeed that area south of 544 from our system. So it was always designed to be able to operate that way. But with that different water purveyor, different provider, Opportunity Regional Water District, we don't currently get any water from them. We would really want to look at, we want to intermix the two water sources. So something we're going to study as part of our infrastructure.
But nothing will be changed until the next session.
Correct. So streets and alleys, what we do, we have an outside third party come and assess the condition of the streets. We actually did it in Castle Hills in 2016 and 2017. We usually try to do that every 3 years, so we will be looking to do it again in this next budget year. Generally, your streets are rated fairly well. They're in overall satisfactory condition, actually a little bit better condition on average than the Louisville proper streets. We've never assessed the alleys, and so we will be asking for some resources to be able to do an alley assessment as well.
How do you do that assessment? I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so we bring in a third party. They've got this van that's outfitted with cameras and sensors and everything. They basically just drive all the lane miles of every street, and they compile the data, they compile the photographs, actually send everything to Ron. He's got it all on an external drive. But then they provide a pavement condition index rating based on all the different tools that they use. And you can kind of see our map has different color ratings. So we get a GIS file, we upload it into our map. We can see, what that PCI rating is. Your average there is 84. You can see the city rating is an average of 75. But then you can see each line segment, basically from intersection to intersection, what that segment is rated. And Ron and his group use that information to schedule maintenance and repairs and where to put our dollars, right? So the philosophy being, if it's a failed section, I don't need to go out there and patch potholes, right? I need to replace that piece. I need to take those dollars that we spend and put them in those areas that are A, B, and C rated so that I maintain that rating as high as I can for as long as I can and stop wasting money on failed sections, put them into a replacement program and get those pieces replaced. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get through this and talk about adding those needs in Castle Hills to our long-term CIP planning process. When I say CIP, I mean capital improvement plan. Acronyms again, sorry about that. So street signs and pavement markings, by all appearance, they're in good condition. We've inventoried approximately 1,125 street signs. One thing, the laws changed a little while back on retroreflectivity. And what that is, that's not an acronym, that's actually a word. But when you pull up and you shine your headlights on that sign, does it reflect back? And you see the content of that sign in the dark. And we need to do an assessment of whether those signs meet that retroreflectivity standard. If they don't, we've estimated a cost of approximately $225,600 to replace those signs. And so we're coming up with these dollars, to provide the financial folks the information they need when they're determining, the tax rate issue, is there enough revenue coming in not only to retire the debt, but also to fund those operation and maintenance, and how quickly would we have to implement replacements of these signs, and how much money would be available to do that.
Who keeps track of or forces trees growing for stop signs?
So right now, excuse me, today, that would be the district. folks, right? Upon annexation, we would get a call to our office, hey, there's a limb block and a sign, our staff would go out there and either trim that, if it's in the public right of way, if it's a tree, we would trim, we would just trim it and clear that from obstruction. If it's on the private property and we want to get the code enforcement officers involved in communicating to that private property owner, hey, you need to trim your trees, then we go back.
We have an automated system in Louisville that will bring out notifications when we annex. So if you're driving around and you see a violation or you have an issue, all you have to do is enter that electronically, and it actually goes to the person who's responsible. We have rules of that ability to respond, and that's quick.
And it's an app on your phone too, you can do it electronically.
So the next thing that we're assessing, unless there's another question, the next thing we're assessing is the ADA compliance of the public walkways, curb ramps. We found that many, in fact, most of the curb ramps do not meet the current standards for the Americans with Disabilities Act or the PRO-WAD, which is the basically the ADA for public rights of way standards. So we will have to replace about 90% of the curb ramps out here. We have a program in Louisville proper where we're doing that today on an annual basis. We're replacing a number of ramps. So we have a plan. These would just be included in the plan. And it's about $1.4 million worth of work that would need to be done over a period of time.
So, how long do they allow you to go before all these curves are ADA compliant? What's the time period?
Yeah, so every city is supposed to have a transition plan that spells out how long you're going to take, how many dollars you're going to spend. Houston tried to get theirs through the federal government with 100 years, and it was most of the ones that the federal government has approved have been anywhere from 10 to 25 years in terms of. Streetlights, we've looked at the streetlights. They're primarily owned and maintained by CoServe. There's a monthly fee, they call it a tariff, that covers the cost of not only the maintenance of the light, but also the electricity. Very similar to the Louisville proper. Our streetlights are primarily owned over there by Texas, New Mexico. So it's not an asset of the city, it's an asset of the utility that they're responsible for maintaining. So we're not expecting to have any additional work associated with that. Screening walls and fences are interesting. There's a lot of beautiful walls, a lot of nice fences in the community. One of the things that we're working on is determining which of those assets would be the city's responsibility for maintenance, which are the responsibility of the individual homeowner, and then the HOA or the other entities that may own those fences. So that's an ongoing effort for us to determine who would be responsible for those. Stormwater, another one of our infrastructure systems. So we will do in the coming year a more thorough assessment of both the visible assets as well as the subsurface assets of the pipes. We have a program in place in Louisville proper where we are videotaping the pipe network. We actually, a couple years ago, had a very significant failure of an underground storm system, caused a lot of damage to a public street, caused an unsafe condition, and so we are really making an effort to better inspect those things that are, they convey water, they're underground, they're not under pressure, they're very rarely looked at, and so we're going through and looking at those today. We'll do the same thing. We'll add underground pipes here to that same system, or that same process. And then we're also looking to determine who will be responsible for creek channels, drainage way. There's a picture on the left side of what looks like a very nice channel, rock line channel in there. Our question and our process right now is who's going to maintain that upon annexation. And so we're working on that as well. Yeah, so the city of Louisville implemented a stormwater utility, all may have heard of it. January of last year, we began collecting a stormwater utility charge, monthly charge on all of the impervious surface in the city of Louisville. So if you own a business or a residence where stormwater lands on your building or your concrete paving, and runs off into the street or the channel or the drainage inlet, we are charging a monthly fee on a typical resident. It's $4 a month, and it goes towards the maintenance and operation of our stormwater utility. A lot of it is geared right now towards capital projects. We've got a lot of erosion problems. We've got a lot of, I mentioned the failure earlier in storm drain. A lot of choke points in our system where we need to make improvements. So that fund is right now slated to pay for those capital improvements, and then there's a piece of it that goes to operation and maintenance. We will have to implement that upon annexation here in Castle Hills as well. So all that impervious area, the commercial area, we have a set rate. It's $1.43 per 1,000 square feet of impervious area. The residential, we will have to study that to see, does it fit in with that $4 model? Would we add that $4 to every utility bill for each resident? Or are the impervious surfaces associated with the residential lots here so much larger than they are in Louisville proper that to be equitable, we may need to look at whether there should be a higher fee on the larger lot. So we'll be studying that, but upon annexation, we will implement that stormwater utility within the theater agreement as well.
So on a regular basis, we compare ourselves to 17 other cities, the major cities in the Metroplex. There were only 2 cities that were not charging a stormwater utility fee. It was us and Carrollton. So now we put ours in place and we understand Carrollton's working on theirs too. The stormwater costs are extremely expensive for cities to maintain, and it's just another way for being able to fund that in a way other than towards the property taxes.
We have a question?
Yeah, it probably a stupid question, but is part of that evaluation like a risk assessment for, like climate change, if you don't have adequate drainage?
So, I'm an engineer by education, and I think in terms of numbers, there are, there is information put out by the federal government that says, in the area in which you live, here's the rainfall intensity that you should be designing for, for any given storm. So we design for what's called a 100-year storm. It's really the storm that has a 1% chance of happening in any given year, right? That 100-year makes people think, well, it rained really hard 3 years ago, so I'm going to do it again for 97 years. That's not the case. So it's that 1% chance. And there are new numbers that have come out recently that do indicate some higher intensity rainfall events are more likely in this region than what was developed in the 1970s, which is what the engineering community has been using for a long time. So the design today may be for more water conveyance than it would have been even in 1996 under the old 70s vintage design. It's not so much, in my mind, it's not climate related, but it probably is. Some scientist in DC said here's the number because of climate change. To me, it's more black and white than that. It's just here's the new number. As far as are we studying the area for the impact, really we look for those problems that develop in specific areas and we respond to them and we come up with plans on how to address them. In my mind, we won't be doing a system-wide stormwater capacity analysis in Castle Hills. We will look at any places that we learn that are choke points that need to be looked at in terms of capacity.
So that's already baked in, basically. When all this stuff is built, they already took into account those numbers.
Again, they should have designed that for that ultimate development and that rainfall intensity. Our engineers, back in the engineering group, could probably tell you they do have a safety factor for Louisville in their engineering design for drainage that does increase the capacity of those pipes over some surrounding cities. I've worked for other cities that didn't use that safety factor. So, you know, Louisville, a new design today should be designed for the ultimate needed capacity. So, thank you. So the next slide. So wastewater collection, I mentioned today that already that we do treat all of the wastewater from Castle Hills. You do have a lift station. This is down in the southwest corner. And actually some of my staff was out here meeting with district staff and reviewing the operational plans, learning how the systems function, and you know, we're going to continue to do that. We'll have a third-party consultant come in and do detailed analysis of each of the critical infrastructure facilities and make sure that you know, pumps that need replacement get into a schedule, motors, valves, all of those components are in good functioning order. You see a generator there that, you know, I don't know how often that gets spooled up and run and load tested. We're going to do those things before we take over the operation to make sure that one, we know first and foremost how to operate under all load conditions that might exist out there, and then to make sure that we know what maintenance has been done, maybe that's been deferred, and make sure that we get in here with a plan of action. Because the very worst thing that could happen in my mind is that stuff, the day we take it over, start having experiencing failures, right? I need to know that our staff is familiar with it. Same on the water system. I did mention that y'all have a couple of ground storage tanks on the lower left, the elevator tower obviously in the middle, and then the pump station on the top. That pump station at one time experienced a catastrophic failure, actually two. And we did float that system south of 544 off of Louisville's pressure for a period of time. I'm actually less worried about the water distribution system than I am about the wastewater infrastructure, because I know we have a backup plan for that. But we are going to obviously look at that contract with Upper Trinity. We would assume that contract. We'd then be responsible for the terms of it. You know, what are the terms? You know, how does it interact with, you know, we have our own water treatment plant, and we also buy treated water from Dallas Water Utilities to supplement our system. How does this third supplier interact with that, and what's the potential for them providing additional water in the future as we need it? So there's a lot for us to understand there. So, you know, those next steps, I've covered all of these with continue that inventory assessment, continue to understand and divvy up those assets that will be ours to maintain versus others, and then review that long-term capital improvement planning. How do I integrate the needs here with the needs of Louisville properly? And then lastly, the contracts. You know, we mentioned water, trash and recycling. Y'all have a different vendor for that than we have. That's also under public services. You know, we need to understand that contract, and then at some point we will integrate Castle Hills' service into Louisville proper service, and that vendor would likely change to be consistent across all of Louisville. So that's really the next step for public services.
Can I ask a question about trash recycling? Is Louisville one day or two?
Yeah.
So
actually here, if you consult the contract, you don't know they pick up this, do something.
Very likely.
Okay. Thank you.
we're one day, but one day across the city. So the city has several, you know, 4 different areas where we each resident has one day at these different days.
Is there an area of Castle Hills that's in Carrollton? Yes. Okay, does that get, because we walked through that and noticed they have Carrollton trash cans.
So, yeah, there's some areas that are recently developed.
Yeah,
that
one that's
actually,
development.
yes, that actually are in Carrollton property.
So they stay from Carrollton?
They stay part of Carrollton.
So you guys be responsible for the extension of Winhaven?
The connection under the railroad tracks? Yes.
Yes, we've been working on that since since 2010. We've had extensive problems. I hope none of you work for a railroad, so I'll just say this, extensive problems working with the railroad. So we're hoping that we should be going into construction in the near future. Design has taken all this time since 2010 because of the issues with the railroad.
So are you looking to go under or over?
Under.
We'll go under.
We'll go under. It's been a very complicated project.
We will own a stormwater lift station that drains to this sump and pumps out. It'll be very interesting. It's the only one we have.
That's scary.
Well, to kind of add on to the water and the wastewater type of discussion, most cities have a water rate consultant that they use from time to time or yearly. And it's because there are so many state laws that govern water rates and how we calculate those. And so we've done an initial review, and because we had a couple of really very important questions to get answered initially. And one was the structure here is different than what we have at the city. The way we've set up our paying for our utility infrastructure at the city is we believe that water and wastewater lines, the plants, any kind of improvements ought to be paid by the revenues that those facilities produce. And so if we have to issue debt, which is called revenue bond debt, we have the water rates pay for those improvements and pay for that debt service on those loans and that debt. Well, in Castle Hills here, you've got a property tax rate that you all are very familiar with that has two components, and Donna talked about this just a little bit. You have one component that's called the M&O rate, the maintenance and operation. It's paying for the operations of the district. And then you have another component that is paying for your debt service of all your infrastructure, your water, your wastewater, roads, drainage, all the public improvements. So property taxes are making the debt payments for water and wastewater assets. And that's the opposite of us, where we have those water rates paid for. So our first question was, can the existing water rates that you pay for now, your utility rates, can those cover your outstanding debt you have right now on your water and your wastewater assets? And the answer to that was, it doesn't appear it can. Your water rates cannot support that. So that told us we're still going to have the same kind of situation after annexation, where all the debt service, which at annexation, what the state law requires is we will assume all liabilities. All of the debt payments you've been making via your property tax, even though the debt is in our name, we have to make those payments should there be a default on making those debt service payments for property tax. So when those come into the city, we've got to make sure that our INS, our property tax rate, that portion that pays for debt service covers that additional debt we're bringing on when we annex you. That's really been the number one question, or the number one answer of why we haven't annexed you sooner, is because that property, the property values have never been high enough to support all that debt payments coming into the city. So the property values did get high enough, we can bring you in, and we're going to make those payments via the property tax rate, the INS portion. INS stands for interest and sinking, which just means your debt service rate component. So the water rates stand on their own. The one thing we did learn, though, as we talked the G and H districts, 1G and 1H, that are still just now developing, all of their improvements aren't on the ground yet. So there's even more debt or even more liabilities there to pay the developer back for those improvements. So that's why we had to carve out G and H and create that TERS because we could not even afford it with the city's property tax rate that we currently have, the 44 cents. So all of you who live in District 1B, C, D, E, and F, all that debt just comes into the city, and we'll make the payments via the property taxes that you pay on that debt service portion of your rate. And the debt service right now, that rate's like about 12 cents of the 44 cents, and the rest goes to the city's maintenance and operations. The next slide. So one of the things we also looked at in the initial look was the rate structure, the type of rate structure you have here. And you actually employ a rate structure that we find appealing. It's called the inclining block rate, or it's a conservation-based rate, meaning that as you increase your water usage, you pay more per gallon for that water. And that's really what the state supports. They champion that because it is a sustainable model, right? If you're going to use more water, you're going to pay for it. The people who hold their water down and they don't use very much water, they get the lowest rate possible. So at the city, City of Louisville proper, we have what's called a flat rate. It doesn't matter whether you use 2,000 gallons or if you use 20,000 gallons, you're going to pay the same rate per gallon. And that really doesn't teach our residents about conservation, right? So we really want to work toward more of the model you have. And we really need to do that. If we ever want to do some funding, there's a entity called the Texas Water Development Board that sometimes the city has gone to help as another resource, as a funding resource for infrastructure improvements. If we ever want to do that, we have to have that type of rate model before we can get that funding. It's a really low interest rate usually. So what we're going to do, we're going to start implementing and looking at that inclining block rate structure. So not this year, but the next year, we're going to do our first rate study in the city, looking at converting our current rate structure to the inclining block structure. Now, our council actually looked at it. You know, it seems to come up every time we have a drought here. You know, it's like, oh, what can we do to conserve water, right? And so we take a look at it, and then, you know, we get lots of rain, and then we just kind of, there's always other pressing issues to look at, so we kind of put it in the back burner. But we're going to actually look at it, bring it forward, and next year do the first implementation of going to that kind of rate model. And then that'll give us one more year to take another look, tweak it a bit, see if we're ready to go, and be in line with you in your rate structure whenever we annex in 2022, 2021. Fiscal year 2022 is when, if she's talking about fiscal year. Yeah. But anyway, we're going to try to be ready about the same time. And now, when I say a rate structure, it's that block rate, right? I'm not talking rates. And the question has come up, are we going to have Louisville water rates, or are we going to keep our same water rate? I mean, is rates going to go up, right? Everybody wants to know that. We just simply don't know yet. As most of us have been talking, we've got a lot of analysis to continue to do and get our costs into where we understand. We've also got to understand, because we're going to assume all those liabilities come annexation, we've got to really take a look at that Upper Trinity water contract and some of the other contracts that we're going to be assuming, and put that in the model and take a look at those costs before we really know if rates are going to stay the same. We don't expect them to go up. Common sense tells us, just in the economy of scale, right, is that we don't need extra, you know, for all the residents that come in. We have some established costs that are already in place that we can just absorb you without adding any additional cost. Now, there may be an additional crew or some various things like that we have to add, but it's not like we have to duplicate all of what we're already doing. So we really think the rates definitely won't go up, and we're hoping it can go down, but we just simply don't know at this time.
Questions?
So we had a question on this, so the city has approved doing this inclined block. So who do we talk to if we want to know, so for example, how is that going to affect like the schools use of water?
Yeah, it's too early to answer that question. Really, we're just starting to study that.
And we really haven't, council approves the rate structure that we'll go with. We're going to do the study, we're going to show them the numbers, give them the data. In the past, they've been very supportive of it, and one of our really big concepts at the city is sustainability. Everything we do, we want it to be a sustainable community and lead into the future. So we think that's what the council will adopt, but we have no idea at that time until we run the numbers and give them that choice and lay it out for them.
It's a difficult process. Yes, sir?
But the question is that, one more. So all this TIRZ, TIF, and all these fancy financial tools, I don't really understand very well. How risky is that for us if we go into a recession?
So we've done the analysis, and we tend to look at a worst-case scenario. So as we've done this analysis, we've taken into account downturns in the economy. We know that's a reality, and we're very confident in our analysis that we're going to be able to move forward, and we're very confident in our financial sustainability.
Yes, but with due respect, your Louisville risk is different than Mr. Homeowner's.
At annexation, you're one of us.
Okay.
All right. My risk is your risk.
Okay.
And right now, if let's say you're a homeowner and you can't pay your property tax, well then you don't pay it, right?
Right.
But if the debt service can't be paid, if enough of you do that and the debt service cannot be paid, then automatically right now, we add an assessment on your property to make those debt payments. When you annex, you become part of the city of Louisville. Obviously, it would take a lot more people not to pay their property tax for us to ever default on a debt payment. And it just simply has never happened in the history of Louisville that we couldn't make our debt payment. There's enough people, enough good people that pay their property taxes every year that that happens. And with a TIF that returs, with that kind of funding, it's really one of the safer ones in that we hit a recession. What happens? We're not going to issue debt for the improvements that have been made already. We're not going to pay the developer back. They have to just be on hold until the property taxes and the values go up enough to where there's money available to start paying them again. So they're really more on the hook should something really devastating happen, like what happened in 2008, 2009, and we had level property tax, and sometimes we had to decline in a couple years, then there's no increased value out here. There's no increased dollars. So they just have to sit and wait for it to, the upswing to start happening again. So.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
If you ever want to have another conversation one-on-one about TERS and PIDs, and Brenda and I would just love to talk with you about that.
Yeah, saturation levels.
We'll let you take a little break.
Okay, thank you.
So council goals engagement. So one of the most important things to the city council is that we begin to engage with the Paso Hills. So we need you to become a part of Louisville. We want to serve you, so we want to get to know you. I told the staff tonight, we want to come out, we want to keep this very casual. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to learn about you and for you to get to know us. So we're taking a variety of steps. One, I think you've all started receiving a quarterly Horizon newsletter. So that's something that we want to make sure we're starting to get information out to you on a regular basis. So we're already working with Castle Hills, the districts, on concerts and special events. So there's a whole list of things here that we're working on. But really, the message I want you to have tonight is that it is a council priority that you become a part of Louisville. It's not an us and them situation in annexation. We are all one city, and we're going to serve you equally. And so we want to make sure we have that relationship. So I wanted you to meet all of the staff tonight, so you know if you've got a question, we're a phone call away. And we answer that phone and we respond to your request. So please don't hesitate to do that. So next steps, one thing I want to talk to you about tonight is our 2025 plan. How many people are familiar with the Louisville 2025? I don't know. So the 2025 plan was established, adopted by council in 2015, and it actually establishes 9 big moves for the city. And it's basically what our residents wanted Louisville to become by their 100th birthday, 2025. We'll be 100 years old in 2025. And so those big moves were everything from thriving neighborhoods to Old Town to sustainability. It's out on our website. I would really encourage you and invite you to take a look at it. I should have brought, I think you all got an annual report with it too. Yes, you did. And so every year since 2015, we've done that annual report, so our residents would know exactly where we are on implementation of 2025. What we're planning to do now is to go back out to the residents to talk about how we're doing. So here's everything that we've accomplished on those 9 big moves. These are the things we haven't accomplished. And then that question is, are there things we should be doing? And so what we want to do is to include Castle Hills in that discussion too. So we're going to be coming out to you, we'll start in the fall. We'll be coming out and we'll be talking to you about our big move and how that fits with Castle Hills. So that's going to be a really important step as we update our 2025 plan to include our new citizens. Any questions about public engagement? I mean, we would love to see you at the events. We love your events. We're going to be coming out here and being a part of Castle Hills, and you guys being a part of us. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
2 quick questions.
Yes.
Question number 1, at the point of annexation, and I realize this is not your responsibility, but do we know?
I didn't recognize you.
Sorry.
I should have got that Texas Tech hat on.
Was that a problem?
His mom used to work for me.
That's right. We spend more time with funny shake stick at.
Yeah.
So my question is, at the time of annexation, currently our zip code is 75056. This is the colony. Screws up everybody because it comes up the colony. I know it's not your issue, but do we know what will happen when we issue a new zip code to this area? Or do we even have an idea?
David, I believe that there would be no change because that's really a coastal issue.
Okay, so
I don't think that's going to change.
just get used to it.
So,
Okay, no, that's
yeah, I
fine.
can fix that one for you.
Half my mail comes to the colony, half my mail comes to Louisville, and some of it comes to rural route. But aside from that, okay, that's fine.
There may be some things we can do to try to.
Well, that's fine. I understand there's plenty of sense to do that.
I heard a rumor from the mail center that they are working on another zip code.
Okay, because we used to live about 700 yards that way, and they changed us from 75007 to 75010. About 2 months after we moved in. So yeah, but they can do it. I'm just curious. Second question, great presentation. Is it online anywhere?
Sorry.
Is it online anywhere?
We'll make sure it's online.
Because a lot of things are color, lot of things are color coded, and I'm too old to see this far now.
Okay, then make sure we do that on.
Thank you.
Say hello to Catherine.
She's right here.
I didn't recognize you either. My eyes are getting old too, Catherine.
Will video be online presentation as well?
Yes, it will.
Yes, okay.
It will.
Yes. Okay. Oh, boards, okay. So we had a long discussion with City Council about boards and commissions. And so we did an analysis and we went through all the city's existing boards and commissions to see which ones, because we know there's an interest in Castle Hills residents to begin serving on our boards, and we want you to be able to do that. So there are some limitations. So some of our boards are established by state law, And state law requires that the people that serve on those boards be residents. Planning is a good example of that. So we couldn't open that board up to you until after annexation. The Parks Board is actually established by city charter, and it says you have to be a resident. So we had to look at those boards that are just created by the city council by ordinance. And so the city council was able to find a number of boards that you can serve on: the library board, the arts advisory board, community development block grant committee, and animal services advisory board. So what you're going to see starting in June, the city secretary will be sending information out to all of you guys to say, hey, here's our boards, we'd love to have you serve, please submit your applications. So I do encourage you to start getting involved. We'd love to see you on some of our boards. We also have a citizens university that we hold annually if you want to learn more about the city of Louisville. And so for the first time, we're going to be opening that up to Castleville residents also. And that is held in beginning October.
Classes begin in August, and we start accepting applications in July. And it's a random selection process.
Questions on boards? Okay, city council elections. So one election that we have already held in the city of Louisville is a governance election. And so what the city council wanted to do was to step back and look at our form of government and decide how it would best work in annexation. And so what was adopted by the Louisville residents is something called residential districts. And the trigger to that new form of governance being put in place is the actual annexation itself. So when we annex Castle Hills, then our form of government will change. Right now, we have a 6-member council, 5 council members, and a mayor. So those 5 council members are voted on at large, as is the mayor. When we convert to residential districts, we will still have a 6-member council with the mayor voted on at large, but then we will form districts, residential districts. And so a person elected would have to live in that district, but still be voted on at large. That is different from what some cities have. Some cities have a single-member district plan. That means they have to live in the district and they're only voted on by the district. We really didn't want that approach because that tends to create fiefdoms, and we didn't want that. And so we are maintaining an at-large system, but you will have to live in a certain district. One of the reasons for annexation being delayed until 2021 is because we have to have the 2020 census results to form those districts. So that's what's really guiding that date of July of 2021. That's our target. It's going to take us that much time to get the 2020 census results, to analyze those results, and to form the districts. Does that make sense? Questions? David, I can't believe you're here with Texas Tech in the Sweet 16.
What time does it start? 8:30. So y'all got to wrap this up.
It's on my mind too. Okay, so a person that came in late, you meet earlier, is our Parks and Recreation Director, Stacy Anaya. She's been with us 2 years, and I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself and then get into her presentation.
Sure. My name is Stacy Anaya, and I've been in the Parks and Recreation business for almost 20 years, and that's hard to believe. So young. Yeah. I'm a park fan in addition to being a park administrator, so I want to make sure that our system is as accessible as it needs to be for what your recreation and play and resilience needs are. We are going to be a big part of the resiliency strategy for the city of Louisville. And the great thing is that Castle Hills is well positioned for that because it was built around the idea that you should be able to walk to a park from your house. And that's great. We've adopted in the city of Louisville a 10-minute walk to a park standard that we are aiming for. and you already meet it. So we are, just like Keith and Brenda talked about, we are still kind of in the discovery phase for the Parks and Recreation Department and determining what parcels will convey and be public that we would be responsible for, which are actually owned by an HOA. So we're working with Mr. Stanley to identify that and learn a little bit about what the current maintenance standards are so that we can then look at how we spend resources and best meet your needs and for recreation. We have a set of standards that we just developed for the Louisville Parks and Recreation Department based on how often we provide services like mowing, cleaning restrooms, irrigation, tree and horticulture standards and turf management. So we'll be looking to see what you have now and applying the same standard, and then determining what our annual budget would need to increase in order to provide that for you and work with your HOAs to do that. One of the great things is that we're going to get to decide together what the park system will look like and how we will connect. One of the things that we're really interested in is the state of Texas requires a city, anytime there's either a disaster or something great like Castle Hills being annexed into the city, that we look at our parks master plan and update it so that the people who are going to be served by the park system and connect with the existing park system have a voice in what the ultimate plan for that will be. Currently, the East Hill Park is our largest park near you, and we'll try to find ways that our trail system can connect to yours, but the city of, you have already a robust trail system, and the city of Carrollton has a very well-planned trail system, and we are working with the city of Carrollton and the city of Coppell through the North Central Texas Council of Governments to extend the DCTA trail line that runs along the rail south so that it connects. So we not only want to help the trail system connect up to East Hill Park, but you'll also be able to head west and maybe get Louisville that way through the trail system, which I think will be incredible. So as soon as annexation happens, we will start the master plan and we'll have public meetings and engagement that will include you in it so that we can dream that vision together. And that's the most important thing I had to say. And my brother went to Tech, so I'll be watching that game too.
So Stacy, but you have to tell me about Thrive.
Oh, yes, okay, so, yes, in next summer, we will open up a 87,000 square foot recreation facility called Thrive, and it's off of Corporate and South Valley Parkway, which is, if you took 3040 out west, you would be near it. If you got to the Buffaloes and went right, you'd be there. And it will feature a large gym, indoor natatorium with slides, a fitness center, community rooms, and several lounges. Immediately adjacent to that will be a 23-acre nature park, and we're hoping that we've designed the facility so that you don't really feel inside and you feel connected to nature. We're kind of bringing Leela to the southwest side of Louisville. We're really excited about that. And the great thing is that right now, this time next year, getting close to it, you'll have access to that because as residents, we consider you residents and you can come play with us anytime.
Where did you say that is?
At the corner of Corporate Drive and South Valley Parkway. So if you know where Harmon High School is? No. I'll give you my card and I'll send you a link so you can read all about it.
Once it gets built, we'll turn it into.
Yes, that's correct. And we have a trail plan on Corporate coming through, so you can ride a bike over there.
Okay, that's really the information that we have for you guys tonight. Again, we're going to be out here on a quarterly basis. We want to get to know you. We want you to get to know us. I need to know if this format worked for you. If it didn't, we'll try something different. We need to get to know you, we want to meet your needs, we want to answer your questions. So send me an email, dbarron@cityoflouisville.com, if you'd like to have some questions answered that we didn't answer tonight, or if there's something we can do different to make sure you're getting the information that you need. So are there any additional questions?
And Barron is B-A-R-R-O-N. Can I ask that? Sure.
I just wanted, we talked a lot about infrastructure in terms of condition ratings. Those are all out on our website. Our park maintenance standards are out there. Our 10-minute walk to a park goals are out there. We have our budgets out there, our financial reports. A lot of our policies on financial conservatism are out there. And so we really want you to get comfortable with the information we have on our website. There's a lot of good data. We're AAA bond rated city, as some of you may or not know, which is as high as you can get. And so hopefully that alleviates some of your concern with risk and some of the ways that we plan for the future. One of the other metrics out there, we talked a lot about fees and different things today, different structures. One of the things we have out there is a rating that the City of Carrollton actually does every year that rates the value of cities according to their survey cities. There are 20 or so surveys out there, cities that they rate. In fact, Castle Hills is one of them that they rate. And every year, Louisville is the #1 rated city that they do in terms of overall value. So they're looking at property tax, your trash rates, your water rates, sewer rates, stormwater. And every year we're by far the lowest in terms of what you get for the value. So you might want to check that out and just look at it as well. So again, there's a lot of information out there for you to look at.
So thank you so much for coming tonight, and again, we're available to answer your questions tonight, online or by phone.